Lust is a powerful force, one that can consume the mind, distort reality, and lead a person down a path of destruction. Lust is a silent destroyer. It masquerades as pleasure, offering satisfaction while draining the soul. It lures with promises of ecstasy, only to deliver emptiness. For many men and women, lust is not just a passing temptation. It becomes a lifestyle. It becomes a trap, a prison, a force that consumes everything pure and sacred. This is a story of how lust dragged me to my lowest point and how grace, God's unmerited love and favor, pulled me out of the darkness. Grace is the unmerited favor of God, a love so profound that it meets us in our filth and refuses to leave us there. While lust dragged me into the pit, grace lifted me out. This is my story of downfall and redemption, of sin and salvation, of despair and hope. This isn't just a personal story. It's a universal battle. Whether pornography, sexual addiction, toxic relationships, or compulsive desires, lust can lead us to make choices that destroy our integrity, relationships, and peace. But there is hope. Even when we fall hard, grace is deeper still. Grace meets us where we are, but never leaves us there. This is a journey from bondage to freedom, from shame to healing, from rock bottom to redemption. No one wakes up one day and decides to ruin their life with lust. The descent is slow, subtle, and deceptive. It starts with curiosity, harmless glances, jokes, fantasies. For me, it began in my teenage years. A glimpse of an image, a late-night movie, a suggestive conversation. It planted a seed. At first, it felt thrilling. I thought I was just exploring my sexuality. Everyone does it, right? But lust doesn't stop at exploration. It demands more. What was once enough quickly loses its power. I needed stronger stimulation, more intense experiences. What began as a spark turned into a raging fire. It crept into my thoughts, hijacked my attention, and robbed me of peace. I began lying, hiding, sneaking. Lust turned me into someone I didn't recognize. I thought I could manage it. I told myself I wasn't addicted. I convinced myself I could quit any time I wanted. But lust is never satisfied. The more you feed it, the more it demands. I started neglecting responsibilities, isolating from friends and family, and compromising my values. Relationships became transactional, physical, and empty. I was always chasing a high that never truly satisfied. Lust made me selfish. I used people instead of loving them. I saw women as objects, not human beings. I was living in a fantasy world where I controlled everything, but in reality, I was completely out of control. I was breaking down emotionally, spiritually, and even physically. My soul was crying out for help, but I kept ignoring the voice inside me. I was a slave to my desires. Rock bottom is different for everyone. For me, it wasn't just one dramatic event. It was the accumulation of years of shame, guilt, and exhaustion. I was tired of pretending, tired of hiding, tired of feeling empty. I hit a point where I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. My confidence was gone. My heart was numb. I had burned bridges, broken trust, and hurt people I cared about. I remember one night, sitting alone in my room, surrounded by darkness. I had just come off another binge of lustful indulgence. The shame was unbearable. I felt disgusted with myself. I felt hopeless. I cried, not just tears, but deep, soul-wrenching sobs. I asked myself, is this who I've become? Is this all there is? That night, something broke inside me. But sometimes brokenness is the beginning of healing. Rock bottom isn't the end. It's where God begins. Grace doesn't shout. It whispers. It doesn't condemn. It invites. In that moment of utter despair, I heard a still, small voice in my heart. It didn't say, "You're worthless." It said, "Come home." It wasn't angry. It was loving. I didn't deserve mercy. I had run from God, rejected truth, and chosen darkness. But grace doesn't wait for us to get our act together. It meets us in our mess. The next morning, I made a decision. I didn't have a plan, but I knew I couldn't keep living this way. I got on my knees and cried out to God. Not a fancy prayer, just raw honesty. I said, "God, I can't fix myself. I'm addicted. I'm broken. But if you're still there, I need you." Grace answered. not with a lightning bolt, but with peace. A peace I hadn't felt in years. It was like the weight of my shame lifted. Even though nothing had changed externally, that was the beginning of my return. Healing doesn't happen overnight. Grace initiates the change, but transformation is a journey. I had to confront the roots of my lust. Insecurity, rejection, loneliness, pride. I started going to therapy. I joined a men's group for sexual purity. I got accountability partners. I installed filters on my devices. I began reading scripture and praying daily. The process was painful. I had relapses. I had doubts. There were times I wanted to give up, but grace kept pulling me back. Every time I fell, grace picked me up. I wasn't alone anymore. I began to see lust not as a pleasure, but as a poison. I learned to replace lust with love, fantasy with truth, isolation with community. Most importantly, I realized that healing wasn't about being perfect. It was about being surrendered. Grace wasn't asking me to perform. It was inviting me to trust. Lust had once defined me. It shaped how I saw myself and others. But grace gave me a new identity, not as a slave to sin, but as a beloved child of God. I wasn't just recovering from lust. I was rediscovering who I really was. I began mentoring others who struggled. I started writing about my journey. I had conversations with young men who were trapped in the same cycle I once was. I saw lives change, not because I was strong, but because grace flowed through my weakness. The very thing that brought me shame became a tool for redemption. Grace turned my scars into stories. It turned my past into purpose. It gave meaning to the pain and turned my rock bottom into a foundation. Even after recovery, lust still lurks. Temptation never fully disappears. But now I live from a different place. I'm no longer chasing fulfillment. I've found it. I know the signs of falling. I know when I'm drifting. And when I do, I run back to grace. I've learned to protect my eyes, my mind, and my heart. I fill my life with purpose, work, relationships, service. I prioritize deep connections over surface-level pleasure. I avoid triggers. I pray daily. I keep myself accountable, not out of fear, but because I value what grace has given me. I live with the awareness that I'm only one decision away from going back. But I also know that grace is always one prayer away. A word to the broken. If you're watching this and you feel stuck in lust, know this. You're not alone, and you're not beyond redemption. Lust lies. It tells you that you can't change, that it's who you are, but it's not. You were made for more. You were made for intimacy, not indulgence. For freedom, not chains. Rock bottom is not the end of your story. It's where grace begins. Cry out to God. Be honest. Seek help. Take one step. And then another. Don't wait until you feel ready. You won't. Just start. Grace is stronger than your sin. It doesn't excuse your mistakes, but it does cover them. It doesn't ignore your pain, but it heals it. You don't have to stay in the pit. Reach out to God. Let grace lift you up. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning. But where sin increased, grace increased all the more. Grace wins. Every time.